Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we are doing a deck tech for Valgavoth, Harrower of Souls. I cannot really pronounce Valgavoth accurately often, so he's going to be referred to as Valley G because he is a hard name to pronounce. Valley G is a 4-mana 4/4 flying ward pay 2 life elder demon. Whenever an opponent loses life for the first time during each of their turns, put a 1/1 counter on Valley G and draw a card. So this is just some Rakdos group slug. Why play Valley G? Because he is a 4-mana 4/4 flying as your commander. That's no joke. That guy will close out games. Whenever you have a commander with evasion, that has a lot of potential to just kill people with commander damage. And that can even happen for him very easily because he gets big every single time, every turn rotation. His ward ability also enables his bottom ability. You want to target him, you have to pay 2 life. An opponent lost life for the first time during their turn. Put a 1/1 counter on him, draw a card. So even if he does die, we still draw a card. He also lets us draw one on each opponent's turns. The way the deck is set up is that everyone is always taking a little bit of damage on their turn to trigger Valgavoth, and just put counters on him and draw cards. So we always stay consistent. In a full turn cycle, he's going to get 3 1/1 counters. So we're going to play him as 4. Ideally, we already have something going on. So then when he gets back to our turn, he's a flying 7/7, which is great. And he also fixes some of Group Slug's draw issues. One of the issues with Group Slug is that there aren't a ton of great draw options with it. Valgavoth as the commander does fix that because he just draws us multiple cards per turn cycle. Like drawing an extra 3 cards is really good. Here's the game plan. As great as he is, we don't need him. Like, yeah, he's a big beater, and also he does help us with draw, but at the end of the day, we have a ton of ways to just burn people out. So early game, we want to get down some just smaller burn pieces, little things that make everyone take 1 on their turn. Then mid game, we just want to play Valgavoth, start drawing some cards, start making him bigger. Late game, our opponents throughout everything, right, are consistently taking burn damage to the point where they can't play spells because they'll lose life, or there are other effects on our board that make it hard for them to play. I will say though, I have another Group Slug deck. You can check out my other video, Torbran. He's sick. The deck trouble that Group Slug decks face is that they live fast and that they die young. So you can kind of go nuts. You can deal a lot of damage, but the issue with Group Slug is that you're also taking damage. So we have a good amount of late gain in this deck to prevent that from happening, because if we're hitting everyone for 4 on a turn, we want to mitigate that. Basically, we don't want to take that much. Channel and deck stuff. The deck is artificially expensive. It's $471 at the making of the video. Most of the Duskmourn cards have not come out yet, and that's kind of why it's still so pricey, because you have some cards listing at like $5 for a random rare and $20 for a random mythic. That's just not the case. And as always, you can just go through the video, trim some of the cards you don't like if they're too expensive. Like, spoiler alert, Shieldred's in the deck. Get rid of that, save $70. It's easy. Get the cards you need from the link down below, and then as always, like, comment, and especially subscribe to the channel. Talking about Planeswalkers. Chandra, Awakened Inferno. Chandra is so good. Can't be countered, already huge, especially at 6 mana, you don't want her getting countered. The mode you want to do is plus her. Each opponent gains an emblem. At the beginning of your upkeep, this emblem deals 1 damage to you. That stacks. It doesn't stack. They actually get multiple emblems, but when you keep plussing her, it's like you now have 3 emblems. Each opponent now has 3 emblems, each dealing 1 damage to them, so they're basically taking 3 on their turn. She is a little tribal nuke. I think we have a handful of elementals, but not really the reason why we're running them. We're really running her for the plus and the minus. She has a minus X, which can be up to 6. Chandra deals X damage to target creature or planeswalker. If a permanent dealt damage this way would die this turn, exile it instead. She's a kill spell for a big guy when we need it. She gets rid of all of the little guys, and then most likely we're just going to plus her to 8 right away and give everyone an emblem. The cool thing about the emblem is it doesn't go away. If we die and we lose the game, those emblems still stick around because the player gets them, which is cool. Ob Nixilis, the adversary. He has Casualty X, and X, the copy isn't legendary, and it has starting loyalty X. So the casualty is just when you cast it, you can sacrifice a creature with power X, and when you do, he enters with that much loyalty. So if you sack like a 2/2, you'll get a copy of him with 2 loyalty. He's good because you're always going to want to casualty him out. That's why he's good. So you're going to have 2 guys. So on your turn, you're going to be, each opponent loses 4 life unless they discard a card. And then if we have a demon or devil, which we do because Valley G is a demon, we gain 2 life. We can also just make devils that when they die, they deal damage to whatever, which is great. And then target player draws 7 cards and loses 7 life. I don't really think Ob Nixilis has super great options to get there. We could, if we really wanted to, in theory, ult him right away by like getting rid of Valley G if Valley G is 7 or greater. But I feel like generally we wouldn't want to do that. We really just want him for the pluses. We just want to keep plussing him and make tokens when we need blockers. Going into creatures, Barbflare Gremlin is really interesting because I think people would like it and I think they'd hate it. First Striking Haste is already really good. Whenever a player taps a land for mana, if Barbflare Gremlin is tapped, that player adds 1 mana of any type that land can produce, then the land deals 1 damage to them. So we attack with him. No one really is going to want to block him because he's a 3/2 with First Strike, which is already good. And then the interesting thing about him, right, is he doubles mana, but when you tap a land for mana, you take 1. So the interesting thing is he worth killing for your opponents? They're going to be taking 1 every time they tap a land, but they get double mana. And we also get double mana, but also we take damage. So it's interesting. Do they want to get rid of it? Do they keep it around? You never know. Blood Artist, whenever he or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. That's just good so we can like spread the love. If anyone does anything crazy on their turn, we can at least like, if like a couple creatures die, we can at least pop everyone for 1. Which is nice, and get a trigger. Cemetery Gatekeeper is very good. I think he's good, specifically more early game. First Strike 2/1, when he enters the battlefield, exile a card from your graveyard. Whenever a player plays a land or casts a spell, if it shares a card type with the exiled card, deals 2 damage to that player. The way I imagine this is we exile a land, right? We exile a land from a grave, get rid of a fetch or whatever. Now whenever anyone plays a land, they take 2 damage. Or we could just really exile whatever, and then whenever someone plays that, they take 2 damage. We got a creature, whenever you play a creature, take 2 damage. It can really punish a lot of decks, which is nice. Eidolon of the Great Revel, 2 mana 2/2. Whenever a player casts a spell with CMC 3 or less, deals 2 damage to that player. That's really nice. Again, the cool thing about Group Slug is a lot of these guys are annoying, right? But they're like, do you want to waste a kill spell on Eidolon? If you do, it costs us 2 mana. So it's really not that, if like, cost us 2 mana, they're probably losing 2 life just to do it. It's really, really good. Falconwrath Noble, just basically the same thing as Blood Artist. Target player loses life, we gain a life. Just to prevent, like when creatures die, we just get benefits out of it. Florian Voldaren Scion, First Strike. At the beginning of your post-combat main phase, look at the top X of your library where X is the total amount of life your opponent's lost this turn. Exile 1 of those cards and put the rest on the bottom of your library, and you can play the exiled card this turn. Florian is nice because we're already wanting to deal a lot of damage during our turn. Even if we have like a 4/4 flyer, we're crashing in for 4, looking at the top 4 cards of our deck, picking the best one, and then playing it that turn. The rest just get shuffled onto the bottom, which is still fine. He just lets us dig really deep for a good card. Gleeful Arsonist, super cool card. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, he or she deals damage equal to its power to that player. So whenever an opponent, and then it has Undying. Undying says when it dies, return it to the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter. And then like if it has a counter and it died, it doesn't undie. Just gets a repeat. So when it comes in, whenever a player casts an opponent casts a non-creature, they take 1 every time, and then when she dies, she's going to come back as a 2/3, and then whenever they cast a non-creature, they're going to take 2 damage, which is cool. Great Unclean One, or really most Magic the Gathering players. At the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses 2 life. Then, for each opponent who has less life than you, create a 1/3 black demon creature token named Plaguebearer of Nurgle. So here's the thing with Group Slug. Group Slug primarily wins by burning out an opponent's, well, burning out everyone, but ideally opponents take more, right? So when we have cards like, everyone takes 5 damage or whatever, right? That's fine because we have other cards like Lethal Arsonist and even Harsh Mentor, which we'll talk about, that only affects opponents. So ideally, we have a higher life total than our opponents, so then we're just making everyone lose 2, and ideally, since everyone has less, we're going to make 3 1/3s. because again, pot of 4, we have 3 opponents. Harsh Mentor is just a good punish piece. Whenever an opponent activates an ability of an artifact, creature, or land that isn't a mana ability, he deals 2 damage to them. It's just good. It's nothing crazy. He's a good 2-drop. And again, that's the kind of thing is, it's only 2 mana. If someone wants to kill him, he shuts down like a lot of things. If someone's playing like an artifact deck or someone's playing like whatever, you can shut down and at least really hurt him. Karavik the Merciless has this sick new art I really like. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, he deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to any target. He's 7 mana. He has a 7 mana effect. Karavik is just hard to keep alive because people kill him. Because if they cast like 2 spells, they don't want to take like 8 damage or whatever. But if he lives, that's a lot of damage to be dealt to anything. That kills creatures, it kills planeswalkers, it's great. Cardor, Doomscourge, super sick card. When he enters the battlefield, until your next turn, creatures your opponents control attack each combat if able and attack a player other than you. When he enters, goad all creatures your opponents control. Goad them all. Then, whenever an attacking creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So that's really cool too, because that's just whenever an attacking creature dies, not our attacking creatures. It is our attacking creatures, it's everyone's attacking creatures. Each opponent loses 1 and we gain 1. Just by our opponents going to combat on their turn and attacking our opponents, they're still punishing each other. We're still drawing cards off Valley G, which is great. Magebane Lizard can be crazy. He hates Storm. He actually hates wizards too. He hates Wizard Lizard. Next, Magebane. Whenever a player casts a non-creature spell, he deals damage to that player equal to the number of non-creature spells they cast this turn. Storm hates this one trick. No, but really, even if it's just 1 a turn, that's still fine. That's still 1 a turn is still the base rate of Gleeful Arsonist on the left. So that's still fine. But if they keep going, or they're like doing cantrips or whatever, being like, okay, you take 1, and now you take 2, and now you take 3, he just gets people low. Also, he's a 1/4 blocker, which is fantastic. We have Ogier Axonil, the Deepest Might. If a red source you control would deal damage, would deal damage less than his power, it deals damage equal to its power. Basically, in a vacuum, if you have a card that would deal less than 4 damage, a red source that would deal a non-combat red source that would deal less than 4 damage, it becomes 4 damage. Let's skip over Temple for a second. For example, using Ogier, Rampaging Ferocidon, menace players can't gain life, beautiful. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to that creature's controller. So looking at Ogier, since it only deals 1, Rampaging Ferocidon and him on the field would say, whenever another creature enters the battlefield, Rampaging Ferocidon deals 4 damage to that creature's controller. It is a double-edged sword in that aspect, because it's not. It's only to an opponent, so no, it's great. So our opponents are, and that's kind of how Group Slug works, is in this instance, all of our opponents are taking 4 whenever a creature enters, and we're only taking 1. So everyone's taking damage, but our opponents more so than us. And then if Ogier dies, we just flip him into this land, which is fine. And then if someone took more than 4 non-combat damage, which is pretty easy, pay 2 or 3, tap it, flip it, we got Ogier back. Razorkin Needlehead, super cool. He has first strike during our turn, and then whenever an opponent draws a card, he deals 1 damage to them, which is really neat because, again, we want small ping abilities to trigger, so Valley G triggers on everyone's turn no matter what. He doesn't work during our turn, but he works during our opponent's turns, and our opponents have to draw. Like, there are some cards where it's like, well, they don't have to cast a non-creature for the Magebane Lizard or whatever, but they're going to have to draw no matter what, and he's going to trigger that. Screaming Nemesis is super cool. There's another card like it called Stigma Lasher. It's way worse, but Stigma Lasher, look it up. Haste, whenever it is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to any other target. If a player is dealt damage this way, they can't gain life. So, let's say we attack, and we attack with a 3/3, and then someone blocks with a 2/2, and we say, okay, we're gonna, since this guy was dealt 2 damage, we're going to deal that to an opponent, and now they're going to take 2, and they can't gain life for the rest of the game. What Group Slug hates is people gaining life, so Screaming Nemesis really deals with that, and you only have to hit everyone once, which is pretty good. Shielder the Apocalypse, Death Touch, whenever we draw a card, gain 2 life, beautiful. Whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life, even better. cards like Shielded are really good because as everyone takes damage, we need to mitigate that some way, because we don't want to, like, when everyone's at like 20 life, we want to be at like 30 life. And Shielded makes that like even more so possible. Sulfim Mayhem Dominus. If a source you control would deal non-combat damage to an opponent or a permanent, it's just your non-combat sources deal double, and then you can pay 4 life and 1 mana, discard 2 cards, put an indestructible counter on him. He's just good. Like, even just like, he just basically doubles up everything. So for example, Sir Conrad now deals 2 damage whenever something happens instead of just the 1. But Sir Conrad, whenever a creature dies, another creature dies, or a creature card is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature card leaves our graveyard, he deals 1 damage to each opponent. And we can pay 2 to have each player mill card. Sir Conrad is great because it's just whenever a creature dies, or a creature gets milled, or a creature card leaves our graveyard, he deals 1 to everyone. Creatures die a lot, cards get milled a lot. Cards are probably not leaving our battlefield very often, but still, it's there. He's just really good. We have the Lord of Pain, brand new card. It's actually the alt commander of this deck. Human Assassin, legendary creature, 5 mana, 5/5. Menace, your opponents can't gain life. Whenever a player casts their first spell each turn, choose another target player. The Lord of Pain deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to the chosen player. It's good because it's just everyone's probably going to cast at least 1 spell during their turn. Very worst, you're like, oh, I'll cast like this 3 mana thing. It's like, okay, well, that player can take 3. Which is cool. And he also makes our opponents can't gain life, which is what we want Group Hug to do anyways. Finally, we have Zozu the Punisher. He hates lands. He hates them so much that whenever they come into play, he deals 2 damage to its controller, including us. So, Zozu may not be amazing. He's 3 mana, he's a little bit awkward, but he really, really hates people doing landfall decks and just like general land decks in general. He also just hates fetch lands, doesn't like them at all. And it's another one of those same logic of like the Razorkin guy, where it's like they're going to probably want to play a land, so it's going to trigger Valley G anyways. Going into sorceries, we have Blasphemous Act just to wipe everything. Dealing 13 damage to everything is pretty much just a hard board wipe. Hard board wipes are also Damnation. Just destroy all creatures. They can't be regenerated, 4 mana, and I love that spooky art. Exsanguinate is nice. Just each opponent loses X life. You gain life equal to the life lost this way. Eventually, we're going to get like a good amount of mana. And it's also just like a good... It can be like a really good finisher. Even just paying like, what, 7 mana into it, making X5, making everyone lose 5 and you gain 15 is pretty solid for making sure that we're staying ahead of everyone's life totals and even just draining everyone. And again, if you can get it higher, like it's going to get to the point where our opponents are at 10 life, so paying 12 would just end the game. Feed the Swarm is not great. Destroy target creature or enchantment an opponent controls, you lose life equal to that permanent's mana value. What red and black cannot really do is destroy enchantments. Feed the Swarm is one of the few cards that really does that kind of effectively. It's going to make us lose a lot of life. And it's a sorcery speed. It's awkward. It's fine. You know, it's fine. We want to have options to get rid of enchantments. Grab the Prize. Super spooky art, but it's really, really good. As an additional cost of the spell, draw 2 cards. If the discarded card wasn't a land, Grab the Prize deals 2 damage to each opponent. It's just good fixing, really. That's really it. It's just like good. It's like it filters our hand. We basically just, in a weird way to look at it, we pay 2 mana, we discard this and another card to draw 2 cards. So it just replaces them. And then if it wasn't a land, deals 2 damage to each opponent, which is still good. Reanimate, put target card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. You lose life equal to its mana value. We just get the best card in any grave, pretty much, and we put it onto the battlefield, which is nice because we do have a good amount of kill spells, which is pretty neat. Torment to the Hellfire is the same logic with Exsanguinate of just pay as much mana as we can into it. Eventually, people aren't going to be able to do it. Repeat the following process X times. Each opponent loses 3 life unless that player sacrifices a non-land permanent or discards a card. It's good because let's talk about like a bad case scenario. Like a bad case is we pay 5 mana, X is 3. Each opponent loses, or like people divide up between like losing 9 life, sacking 3 non-lands, or discarding 3 cards. It's really good either way. And depending on where you are in the game, it can just like, making it too big can kill people. it can just make them sack their whole board or lose their whole hand. Either way, it's good. And even if they're losing 3 life or 9 life from that X's 3, that's still pretty good. Like 5 mana, make each opponent lose 9 life is really good in Group Slug. Toxic Deluge, as an additional cost of the spell, pay X life. All creatures get -X/-X until end of turn. The reason this card's in here is it's nice to have hard board wipes like Damnation. Valley G can get above the 13 limit that Blasphemous Act has, but it's nice to be able to just say creature, like even one rotation, Toxic Deluge -6/-6 is going to kill most creatures, and Valley G is still living. Going into instance, we have Bedevil to pop an artifact, creature, or planeswalker. Good. Chaos Warp, get rid of something we don't like. That's another great way to get rid of enchantments. It's probably the best way for red to get rid of enchantments. Then reveal the top card of their library. If it's a permanent card, they put it on the battlefield. It's a gamble, but ideally if we're shuffling away something we really don't like, the odds of them getting something worse are low. It's really good. Dark Ritual, that's a Valley G on turn 2, just by having a red and a black with that Valley G. Really good. Deflecting Swat, the idea is the deck doesn't need him to win, but the idea is he's always there. So we can just pay it for free if someone tries to kill Valley G and just change the targets and have that kill something else. Malakir Rebirth is a land on the other side that enters tapped, but the important part is pay a mana, choose Valley G, we lose 2 life, and then when Valley G dies this turn, return it to the battlefield tapped under returner's control, which is nice if someone kills him or the board wipes or whatever. He's really, really scary, right? And although he can kill people with commander damage, and that's definitely something we have an interest in, that's not like the end-all be-all. But once you see a flying 7/7 as a commander, that's really scary. So people are going to want to kill him after one whole rotation, and we do not want that to happen. So we have cards like, again, Deflecting Swat and Malakir Rebirth to keep him around. Price of Progress is to punish people who have fancy mana bases. Deals damage equal to each player equal to twice the number of non-basics that player controls. If they're going nuts and have like no basics, great. The cool thing about Price of Progress is it only gets better with the years because they're making better and better non-basic lands. So people are going to want to run more. And it also punishes multicolor decks that need it. Like, monocolor decks don't care about Price of Progress that much. 2-color decks can be if you have a lot of non-basics, but once you get to 3, 4, 5-color decks, you need non-basics, you need dual lands, you need all of that stuff. Like, my Elemental Tribal deck is a 5-color deck, and I have 9 basics in that deck. Price of Progress could literally just deal, like, 60 damage to me, and it just is what it is. Obviously, that's an extreme, but even just dealing, like, an instant speed, 10 damage to some people for 2 mana is great. Rakdos Charm, it's just kind of good utility. Exile all cards from target player graveyard, pop an artifact, or each creature deals 1 damage to its controller. We're only going to have a handful of creatures. If someone has like a token deck, this is going to straight up kill them. But either way, any mode we choose is going to be good. Terminate is very short, sweet, and to the point. Just get rid of a creature. Can't be regenerated. Great. Withering Torment is a brand new card, and it's not great. But again, Black and red have like no really good ways to deal with enchantments. So Withering Torment can destroy target creature or enchantment, and we lose 2 life, which is really, really good. I'm making such an emphasis on this because enchantments are generally what gain a lot of life for people. And it's something we can't interact with. So when we only have like Feed the Swarm and Withering Torment and Chaos Warp, we have 3 ways to get rid of enchantments. So when we have an enchantment on the battlefield that someone has that's really bothering us, we need to be able to get rid of that. Going into artifacts, we have Arcane Signet, just good mana rock. Basilisk Collar, equipped creature has Death Touch and Lifelink. The cool thing about Basilisk Collar is we have a lot of guys and creatures that just say whenever this guy deals, basically has an effect. It's like an opponent does something, it deals X damage to that opponent. Now that it has Death Touch and Lifelink, we're going to be gaining life, and if we choose to hit a creature with that damage, it's going to kill it right away, which is really good. At the very worst, we put it on Valley G, and I was like at worst a 4/4 flying lifelink Death Touch, which is still really good. Bolus's Citadel, super good. It's honestly a great way to kill ourselves and everyone else. You may look at the top card of your deck at any time. You may play the top card of your deck. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its mana cost rather than its, paying mana for it. And then we can pay, sacrifice it, sack 10 non-lands, and then each opponent loses 10 life. And that can close out games too, but it's really nice to be able to be like, oh yeah, we played like Price of Progress, and then we played this other big burn spell or whatever. Again, hurting us at the same time, but it can be really fun. I love Bowls of Citadel. Lightning Greaves, put it on Valley G or any other guy if you want to give it haste and Shroud. It's really just to give it Shroud to protect it. Mithril Coat is great to toss on Valley G because its flash gives him indestructible, and it is indestructible. So if someone tries to kill him or whatever, great. He's now indestructible, so they can't. Rakdos Signet is just another good mana rock. Same thing with Soul Ring. Same thing with Talisman of Indulgence. Again, all just mana rocks. Because Rakdos doesn't have a ton of ramp. Not a lot of, land ramp. Thought Vessel's particularly good because we're going to draw a lot of cards. And, again, when we're drawing one on our turn, and then we're drawing one on each of our opponent's turn with Valley G, we're drawing 4 cards a turn cycle at the least. So we want to make sure that we're not discarding it all. We also have Wayfarer's Bauble. Remember that time I said that there's no land ramp really in Rakdos? Well, here's land ramp in Rakdos. It's a 1 mana artifact. Pay 2, tap it, sack it, search your deck for a basic land, put it on the field tapped, shuffle. It's good early game. It's kind of bad late game. Just is what it is. Whip of Erebos. Creatures you control have lifelink. This is just to kind of help stop us from dying to our own spells. Because when we're dealing a bunch of damage to everyone, we want to make sure that we're still living. And then in a pinch, as a sorcery, we can pay 4, tap it, return a creature from our grave to the battlefield, give it haste, and then it's exiled. But yeah, just the static ability of our creatures have lifelink is real good. Going into enchantments, we have Animate Dead. Do not worry about all that text. All Animate Dead says is just enchant a creature card in a graveyard, anyone's graveyard. It enters the battlefield. It's a -1. It gets -1/-0, and then if Animate Dead goes anywhere, the creature's gone. The creature dies. It's pretty self-explanatory. It just has crazy text on it. Black Market Connections is really good. At the beginning of our pre-combat main phase, choose 1 or more. Pay a life, or lose a life, make a treasure. Lose 2, draw a card. Lose 3, make a 3/2. I don't really care about making a 3/2 in this deck, but losing 3 life and making a treasure and drawing a card is really, really good. Because we want to make sure we have the mana to cast all these big burn spells, and we want to make sure that we are drawing these big burn spells. Burning Earth is whenever a player taps a non-basic land for mana, it deals 1 damage to that player. That's really good. It's kind of the same logic of people have to take damage because they have to tap mana on their turn, they have to play spells, which is always going to trigger Valley G. And then it can go even bigger when you have cards like Ojer that says whenever you deal non-combat damage, if it's less than his power, deal it to its power. So cards like Burning Earth now tap and deal 4, which is really cool. Good. Exquisite Blood with my main man, Asterion. Whenever an opponent loses life, you gain that much life. That's the whole point of our deck, is our opponent's losing life. So if we can essentially steal that life, it means we're living longer. Fiery Emancipation. If a source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, deals triple that damage to that permanent or player instead. My main man Torbran in the art, it's really, really good. It's a damage tripler. That's really good. It's just us. All of our stuff deals triple damage now. Great. Havoc Festival. Whew. Players can't gain life for 6 mana. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player loses half his or her life rounded up. Havoc Festival cannot kill anyone because it's always going to be rounded up, and even if they get to 2 life, it's going to be rounded up to 1 life, and then even if they're at 1 life, it's still going to be half of 1. I guess it would be none, 0.5, so it's rounded up to 1, so they're always going to be at the very worst 1 with Havoc Festival. This can kill us too. The way Havoc Festival is put about is, and ideally this is how it goes, we play Havoc Festival. It then goes to our opponent's turn, they lose half their life, then everyone loses half their life. We get to our turn, hopefully we can finish the job, especially when it comes in at turn 6. Hopefully we can finish the job, and even at the worst case scenario, everyone's at 20 life, it's now gets rid of half their life, and it's only going to get worse and worse and worse. Mana Barbs, whenever a player taps land for mana, deals 1 damage, hurts, people have to cast spells, is what it is. Painful Quandary, whenever an opponent casts a spell, they lose 5 life unless they discard a card. It's really good because every spell now again, it's basically as an additional cost, they either lose 5 life unless they discard a card. So if they don't discard a card, they lose 5 life. If they discard a card, it's all good, but now they're a whole card down, which is good. Phyrexian Arena, draw a card, lose a life on our upkeep. We just draw an extra card because, again, when Valley G isn't on the field, because he's kind of like a kill on sight commander, when he's not on the field, we want to make sure that we're still like drawing cards and doing what we want to do, making sure we're still always getting the action. Roiling Vortex is super sick. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, deal 1 damage to him. Great. Whenever a player casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast that spell, it deals 5 damage to that player. That doesn't sound like it happens a lot, but there's a lot of 0 mana spells, like even like all of like the Deadly Relic, even Deflecting Swat, all of those 0 mana or free spells. If someone's doing something with like Omniscience or whatever, just casting stuff for free, they're taking 5 just for it. And then just as an added little benefit, pay a red, your opponents can't gain life this turn. This is basically when someone has a life gain trigger on the stack, and you're just like, nah, not happening. Spell Shock. Whenever it basically all Spell Shock is whenever a player casts a spell, deal 2 damage to him. When it says successfully, even if it gets countered, they're still taking 2. The Oracle text is just whenever a player casts a spell, deals 2 damage to him, which is good. We want that. Sulfuric Vortex, at the beginning of each player's upkeep, deals 2 damage to that player. If a player would gain life, they don't. It's really good. Again, every turn we just want to hit everyone for a little bit. And we have all of these like effects where they seem like they're nothing, right? But it's like Sulfuric Vortex is going to deal 2, and then Roiling Vortex is going to deal 1, and then you have all these other cards that are going to deal 1, and just like whenever someone does this, they take 1. It adds up to be like, oh, cool, like I just existed and I went to my turn and I cast a spell and I just took like 10 damage for basically playing the game. The final enchantment we have is Theater of Horrors. 3 mana. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of our library. During our turn, if an opponent lost life this turn, you may play lands and cast spells from among cards exiled with Theater of Horrors. And then we can pay 4 mana to make target opponent or planeswalker take 1 damage. So the idea is that we're always going to be hitting everyone just with like a multitude of effects. Even just combat damage is going to trigger Theater of Horrors. It's just good. It's weird card draw, basically. It's just weird card draw, but still good. Going to lands, it's nothing too crazy. It's just Blood Crypt, but there's like no fetches or anything. So Blood Crypt is good, just enters untapped if we need it. Bojuka Bog to exile someone's grave. Canyon Slow is not very good. Canyon Slow enters the battlefield tapped. It's fine to play at turn 1. There's nothing wrong with that. The way I look at Canyon Slow is it's a land when we need to play like a tap land, I guess, if it's early game. And then if we draw it late game, say like we just draw a bunch with like Valley G, it's like cool, we can just pay 2, discard it, draw a card, just kind of get it out of there. Command Tower. It's going to tap for our 2 colors. Same thing with Dragon Skull Summit because we have a lot of basics in this deck because we run cards like Price of Progress and we don't want to take damage. Graven Karens is kind of a necessity in this deck just because we have a lot of double black, double red, and we even have like triple red and triple black with Bolas the Citadel and Fire Emancipation. It's just we want to be able to filter and get more of that. Haunted Ridge is almost always going to enter the battlefield untapped. Leech-ridden Swamp is super cool. It is a land. It's a swamp land. Enters the battlefield tapped, fine. We can pay 1 black and tap it to make each opponent lose 1 life. And we can only do it if we have 2 or more black permanents, but it is just like a fun little cheeky, it gets to our opponent's turn, we don't have any real burn damage or they didn't take anything. It's like, okay, well we can just tap it and have you lose 1 life, or have everyone lose 1 life on their turn, and then we'll just draw 1 card from it. It's good. Luxury Suite is almost always going to enter untapped. If it's entering tapped in this deck, you're doing good. You're winning if it's entering tapped. Reliquary Tower for no max hand size because we draw a lot. Smoldering Marsh because we have a lot of basics, so it's almost always going to enter untapped. Witch's Clinic is cool because it gives Valley G lifelink for 2 mana, and again, when he's like a 7/7, swinging in for 7 flying lifelink is great. Gain a lot of life off that. And then we just have 13 mountains and 10 swamps. We're pretty equal. I think it's like a 54-46 split. Since we have cards like the Bojuka Bog and the Leech-ridden Swamp, we took away a couple basics from the swamps. But yeah, it's pretty much, I think, 36 with MDFCs. That's all I got for you guys. Thanks for watching. Get the cards you need from the link down below. And as always, like, comment, and especially subscribe to the channel. I always appreciate it when you do. And I will see you guys next time.